What is a counter-narrative? Counter-narratives are stories that typically challenge dominant ideologies or beliefs. The characters in counter-narratives are usually people of non-dominant groups like women, people of color, or non-heterosexuals. Counter-narratives are also not heard as often and are not universal stories. They are also not Hollywood films, which make them not easily accessible to all audiences. Some examples of counter-narratives are films like Pariah and Walkout, and also the podcast 3 Miles. Another excellent example of a counter-narrative is the film Pariah. Pariah, which is exclusive to only HBO, therefore making it harder for audiences to view, is about an African-American girl named Alake. It is a counter-narrative because it tells the story of an African-American lesbian woman, and every character in the film is African-American. Dominant narratives are seen time and time again in films and stories, and they're usually told from the perspective of normative groups like white, middle, or working class heterosexual males, and reinforce dominant ideologies or beliefs. It is extremely uncommon to see a film with a cast entirely African American. Normally, it is the opposite, and the cast is entirely white. It is also extremely uncommon to see a film with a lesbian main character. This film is important because films allow us to gain empathy for the characters in the movie. In Erman Siddiqui's article, Why a Black Annie is So Important, he writes, "Films can teach people things, often without them knowing. They have the ability to teach empathy by placing audiences so deeply in the shoes of another. This film allows viewers to be put into Alake's shoes and teach empathy for African American lesbians, and unconsciously break the stigma that comes with it." An example of a counter-narrative is the podcast 3 Miles. This podcast follows the life of Melanie. Melanie was a successful high school student and was supposed to go to a great college and achieve her goals, but ended up dropping out of high school and working in a grocery store. This story is a counter-narrative because it is a podcast and not as accessible to audiences, therefore not allowing great amounts of people to hear the story, and also because counter-narratives are oftentimes sad. They are not universal stories. Viewers and listeners don't want to hear a sad story where the protagonist fails. They want to hear happy stories where the characters triumph. This podcast also questions the ideas of meritocracy, which is a prominent theme in most dominant narratives. Meritocracy is the view that inequality is fair because everyone has an equal chance to succeed, and success is determined by individual merit. In most dominant narratives, the protagonist overcomes his or her struggles and succeeds on their own merit. But in this podcast, Melanie was never given a fair chance to succeed. She wasn't offered AP courses and basic school necessities that would further her thinking and help her achieve her goal of getting into college. Dominant narratives allow people to believe that hard work can solve any problem, and that is simply not true. This is why counter-narratives are so important. They challenge the ideas that dominant narratives reinforce. 3 Miles shows the audience that meritocracy isn't viable because not all students are given equal chances to succeed. Dominant narratives show that it's the student's fault they're failing, when in reality, there are so many more factors that go into academic and occupational success, and counter-narratives show that.